Resuming debate.
From Selkirk, Interlake, Eastman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm honored to be able to stand today and talk on Bill C-69, the Budget Implementation Act, or what I like to prefer to call it the Economic Vandalism Act. Mr. Speaker, you know, this is a budget that again continues to build upon the inflationary deficits that Canadians are struggling to deal with. That when you have a government that continues to spend out of control, first they were borrowing money, and then they were printing money, and now they're going to continue to dip into the pockets of Canadians with higher taxes to spend for all their crazy ideas and programs. And we know that they've gotten no results the entire time that they've been in government. For the past 9 years, we have witnessed rents double. We have witnessed the cost of a mortgage double and the cost of a down payment double. You know, our children and grandchildren will not have that opportunity that we did to own a home and to move ahead in life because of the out-of-control spending of this Liberal-NDP government. We have a deficit this year that's going to be over $40 billion and has been described as the worst budget since 1982. And who said that? Former Liberal-appointed Bank of Canada Governor David Dodge. Now, Mr. Speaker, we have witnessed over the last 40 years that Canada's now got the worst living standards in the past 20 years, according to the Fraser Institute. We've also seen that under this Liberal-NDP government that we have the worst growth in GDP, or income per person, under this government since the 1930s. And 9 in 10 middle-class families are paying more in income tax today than they were 9 years ago. So we have an increasing situation that is hurting everyone. And I can tell you that from my riding of Selkirk and Lake Eastman, it's hitting everybody straight up. Our farmers are struggling with increased carbon taxes that's gone up 23%, and now have to deal with a capital gains tax that is really starting to take a bite. That, you know, you look at, you know, how farms have been structured, the family farm, over the last number of years, and I come from a farm family. You know, my daughter and son-in-law are grain farmers. My brother is a farmer, so is his. So I got 2 brothers that are farmers, and I can tell you that, you know, all their hard work and effort into growing their property and making sure that there's something there to pass on to the next generation, the same thing that my father did for his children, you know, all of that is at risk. And so to make things more manageable, people have formed themselves, foreign families, into limited corporations. So have our doctors, our dentists, our chiropractors, all, especially in rural areas, have set themselves up into limited liability partnerships and corporations. And those limited corporations pay out capital gains. And of course, now these capital gains are all going to get taxed by the Liberal-NDP coalition at up to 67%. This isn't a tax on the wealthy. This is a tax on the hardworking people that feed us, that take care of us, that take care of our health. And all of them are going to be attacked and become either less profitable or forced to relocate to jurisdictions like the United States, where it is easier to make a living without having to work as hard. I've had doctors and dentists tell me that they're going to actually work less hours because of the income tax implications with the capital gains tax grab happening by the Liberals and the Minister of Finance. And this is also, of course, hitting cottage owners and those, Mr. Speaker, that are, you know, have secondary residences, whether they're for rental income, whether they bought a home that they hope to pass on to their children. But when they go to sell those properties now, they are going to get nailed with this capital gains tax that they didn't even ever expect. There's a word for this when somebody's taking something away from you that other person never deserved to get. It's called highway robbery. And that's the economic vandalism that we're talking about here, Mr. Speaker, by the Liberal-NDP coalition. Now, as the Shadow Minister for National Defence, I do want to switch gears here and talk about how this budget does not support in any way, shape, or form the even less ambitious defence policy update. The defence policy update had some ideas in there, but all the spending, especially in this budget, has been kicked down the road till after the next federal election. We're talking 3, 4, 5 years down the road before we see any increase in spending for national defense to support our troops. At the National Defense Committee today, we actually had one of our witnesses that said the defense policy update is a national embarrassment, that failed to recognize the threat environment that we're in, that technically Canada is already at war. We're witnessing what's happening in Ukraine. We've had increased escalation and conflict in the South China Sea between the PRC and the Philippines, plus what we're seeing in Taiwan. And this defense policy update fails to recognize those threats. And all the money that supposedly has been promised is all kicked down the road. Case in point, we have a retention and recruitment crisis happening in the Canadian Armed Forces. And one of the things that we identified is the lack of housing. The Minister of National Defense even said that we're short 6,700 residential housing units for our troops. We have troops who are living homeless. We have troops that are actually staying on couches, couch surfing. They are living in campers, they're living in their cars, or worse yet, they're stuck in these tent cities that have sprung up all across the country over the last 9 years under this Liberal government. And even though the government recognizes that we need more homes for our current serving members of the Canadian Armed Forces, there is $0 in this budget for new housing for our troops. There is $0 in the budget next year, and there's only $8 million in the budget in 3 years' time. $8 million doesn't build 6,700 housing units. $8 million won't build, in today's dollars, 24 homes. That is, again, a national embarrassment. We have people that can't house themselves properly, who are serving this country, and this government fails to recognize, this defense minister fails to recognize that we have to support our troops. So we have a retention and recruitment crisis, and the defense policy update has no idea how we're going to increase our troop strength. We're 17,000 troops short today, and it could get worse if this doesn't get rectified soon. We have this housing shortage, and of course we have no money to put into new houses. And as we heard today again at committee, we have an army that they have no plan to get them new kit so that they can become the expeditionary force that we have come to rely on as Canadians. Now, case in point on how this government doesn't take our forces seriously and puts them in awkward positions is the news that we heard just this weekend, that the Canadian Armed Forces, through the Royal Canadian Navy, went and positioned one of our Arctic offshore patrol vessels in Havana, Cuba, for a celebration of the communist dictatorship in Cuba. And they are docked alongside Russian Navy destroyers. Why would we want to use the Royal Canadian Navy to liaise with a hostile dictatorship in Cuba and an aggressive country that's invading Ukraine today? And we know, Mr. Speaker, that Cubans are serving in the Russian armed forces today fighting in Ukraine. We know that Cuba has actually sent troops to Belarus to train alongside Russian and Belarusian soldiers so that they can invade Ukraine again from the north. Mr. Speaker, this is a national embarrassment, and again speaks to the fact that this government doesn't have a plan when it comes to supporting our troops, and rather uses them for photo ops with communist dictatorships rather than supporting our allies in fighting back on the evil that's occurring around the world. We have our frigates that can't be deployed on an as frequent basis. We no longer have destroyers. We no longer have any of our own supply ships. They're slowly coming. We got the Asterix out there, of course, which we ordered when we were government. But we don't have the same reach in the Navy that we used to. Now you look at Ukraine, and here's a government again that continues to dither and delay in delivering. They announced 18 months ago that there's going to be NASAM sent to Ukraine, Mr. Speaker. They're still not there. They finally announced that we're sending 2,000 CRV-7 rockets Guess what? We asked back in February to send the 83,000 we had, not the 2,000, Mr. Speaker. So we'll continue to put pressure on this government to do the right thing for Ukraine, for the Canadian Armed Forces, and for rural Canadians from coast to coast to coast.
Hear her.